my colleague Brian Richards, who is the manager of the Fashion Zone. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with who we are a campus linked incubator here at TMU. And we are dedicated to helping early stage founders launch their business. So we say that we have two categories of startups that we support. So those are day zeros. So those are people either with an MVP that are looking to refine that or work on their prototype, or they're working towards their MVP. And then we have our day 10 startups. So those are people who have been in the market, they've launched, they may have some traction in sales, and they're really looking to grow and scale their businesses. So that's one side of what we do here at the Fashion Zone. And then on the other side, we do support TMU students who have an interest in fashion entrepreneurship. So they could be working on building a business idea in a low stakes environment. They just may have a general interest in fashion entrepreneurship, or they're looking for work opportunities with one of our startups. So Brian and I had the opportunity to meet Justina about a month ago, and we were so thrilled to learn about her platform, because I don't have to tell you that grants for creatives are few and far between, especially in fashion. That's like a niche inside of a niche. And we're all sort of like crowded around the one dumpster fire trying to find grants. So I think that you're going to find a lot of benefit in this platform. So if you're interested, I'm going to drop our email in this chat here. If you want to learn more about the Fashion Zone and our intakes, you can send us an email, and I'm happy to connect with you offline. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Justina Kanza, who is the CEO of Granted, and she's going to take us through our demo this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angelique and Brian, for having me and for connecting and trusting us to really support your ecosystem with our grant technology, and for the context of today's conversation, some grant education. So a little bit about me. My name is Justina Kanza. I'm the founder and CEO of Granted. We actually started Granted almost exactly a year ago now. And it's a whole entrepreneurship story. This is a room of entrepreneurs, so I like that we can be vulnerable about the chaos and the struggles of what comes with building a business. Granted launched March of last year. We didn't go to market until July of last year because we were building, and between then and now, we've actually raised over almost $100,000 in grants ourselves as a very early stage tech startup. Our users have raised almost 100K in grants as well, over 700 users. And we just recently released a new version of our platform that is upgraded and optimized. And I was just saying to Angelique and Brian before we started that you guys will be the very first public group to see this, because we finished development and got it ready just last week, and we'll be launching it to the public tomorrow by God's grace, and then doing a public demo next week. But you guys are the first to get an insight on that. But yeah, so in addition to what I do at Granted, I'm also a founder of a nonprofit called Okwara Academy, which is where the desire to build Granted came from, actually, because I was running this nonprofit that really depends on grants, and the process of finding grants was incredibly overwhelming, incredibly frustrating. And I don't have to describe this sentiment to you guys, because you're founders, and I imagine you're going through the same problem, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Outside of that, I've raised over $2 million in grants for multiple ventures from funders like City of Toronto, University of Toronto, Government of Canada, Frontlines, MasterCard Foundation, to name but a few. And I actually used to work in a role similar to Angelique's at the Black Founders Network at University of Toronto. I was the program coordinator there, supporting other Black entrepreneurs with capital, capacity building, and community, and capital being at the center of what founders need, which is how I was able to really connect with the problem that we're solving for at Granted. And so what inspires me to solve the problem that we're solving at Granted? I always start with this big number, the $37 billion. This is, I'm going to leave it to the crew, to everyone here, to guess, what do we think this number represents? I'm trying to be more engaging and interactive in my presentations, because I could talk for 2 hours. But yeah, what do we think this number represents? $37 billion. Drop it in the chat. Oh, come off mute. I see Diogano has something to share.
I was just going to say, I'm assuming it's probably the amount of funding that's available for us to access. When I say us, I'm saying the general public and people eligible for these grants. And I want to say probably on an annual basis.
You're right. I see a couple folks mention the same in the chat. So this is funding in grants that's available every year, but this funding even only represents funding available in Canada. funding available to Canadian founders. So there's way more beyond Canada, but for the context of this conversation, we're talking of Canada. But a lot of this money is left on the table because of the problem that comes with grant seeking. And so I'll pose another question. What are some of the challenges that you have faced to date when it comes to finding the right grants? What makes it challenging? What makes it frustrating? What are some of those problems that you're facing? What brings you here today? So again, you can come off mute or you can drop a couple of comments in the chat. Yes, Delgado.
Oh, me again?
Oh, you're unmuted and you're on my screen.
I mean, for me personally, I would say that I remember there's about 3 grants that I applied for back to back to back. The first one took me about 3 hours to do. The second one about 2.5 hours to do. The third one took me about 3.5 hours to do as well. And I came to find out that as I submitted it, the format in which I submitted was incorrect on every single one. And I looked at myself and I said, I just spent close to 12 hours or 10 hours or however long it took for there to be malfunctions.
Absolutely.
And I had to do the process again. I was like, not in the sense defeated, but I was like, there has to be a way that's more efficient than this, because this is just manually to do this is a very, very daunting process.
Absolutely.
As we know, as business owners, we have a lot more things that we should be doing with our time. Not that it's not important, but there's so many things that our time deserves allocation for, that sitting down to put 3 hours in a grant function is very, very, it's not good.
I agree. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I couldn't relate more. I think as founders, we should be focused on the building. We should be focused on the impact and the innovation and the creativity. And so some of these administrative tasks that really bog us down are so unnecessary. And in every other aspect of our business, we've created structures and systems and technologies to make this easier. We've got CRMs for sales, right? We've got tools for marketing. We've got our AIs and GPTs and whatever for writing and brainstorming. But grants and fundraising seems to be one area that is still yet to be innovated, and absolutely can relate to like the 12 hours plus on writing a grant. I remember last year, I always tell this story with a bit of like a heartache, because I remember we missed out on a 300K grant last year at my nonprofit, and we spent collectively probably over 20 hours writing this grant application. And we missed out on this grant because one single detail was wrong. Just one single detail was wrong. That was completely avoidable, but everything else was okay. But because we are founders and our minds are in so many places, we have to deliver programming, we have to lead teams, we miss out on details. And so that's why we need some of these extra tools. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Dil. I see a couple of folks in the chat. As Zavosh says, finding is less challenging than the application process and getting approved, which is usually done through having friends and relationships. Absolutely. This is another challenge with grant seeking. It's sometimes you have to know the right people, you have to know the funders, you have to know the program managers, you have to nurture and build these relationships. But you do not have the time to nurture and build these relationships if you're tied down in the administrative tasks. So what are the ways that we can free up your space so that you can put your, it's like the 80-20 rule. Put the 20% of effort in the 80% of the outcomes, instead of spending 80% of our effort in something that only moves the needle 20% of the time. I really appreciate that you shared that. Another one here is interested in learning more about navigating the grants application environment, since it's so vast and can be challenging to know where to start. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that as well. Yeah, so definitely touch on some of those things. But okay, so going back to, you guys have covered a lot of what these challenges are. You guys have shared some of these challenges, and these are things that I hear all the time. I hear all the time from founders like yourselves. Like I mentioned, I've served over 5,000 founders through the University of Toronto Entrepreneurship, and this problem is not just unique to you guys, right? It's the challenge in understanding funder priorities. Like you said, Diogano, you spent 12 hours writing an application in a format that was completely wrong. And to me, that sounds like not really understanding what the funder is looking for and what their priorities and structure of an application looks like. The time consumingness of fragmented and complex processes, the landscape is very vast. And so it's so time consuming to find. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, because there's all these grants databases that have 10,000 grants. But to find one grant that matches your fashion tech takes forever, right? So all of these problems are things that I've heard over and over again. And the problems come with a cost. And part of that cost is the 20 to 40 hours per week that's focused on grant-related activities instead of being invested in your businesses. It's the up to 20K and can even go up to 100K really per year on grant writers and grant consultants, only to face a 70% rejection rate. For founders that are marginalized, whether you're a woman, whether you're Black, whether you're racialized, there's an added funding inequality here, which is only 2 out of 300 grants going to Black businesses as an example, and only 4% of women-led businesses in Canada being funded. So the cost of inaction is really, really intense. And I don't have to emphasize that to you guys because you're on this call and you've already spent that 12 hours that could have been invested in your sales activities or building your venture, right? So the goal of this call today is really to help you transform, on one hand, your approach, because like I mentioned, grants and fundraising should have a system like anything else in your business, right? So how do we transform your approach from the old way of pursuing funding, which is often reactive and frustrating and can sometimes be overly manual and complicated, to the new way, which is strategic, which is systems driven, but also it puts you in perfect alignment with the funders. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to spend maybe the next 20 minutes quickly going through the little presentation I have. There's time at the end for Q&A, but if you do have a question while I'm sharing, drop it in the chat or come off mic so we can have an interaction. So there is one fundamental shift that I always start with when we're coming to this place, because you're coming to this room as creators, creatives, fashion designers, clothing brands, whatever the title is, you're coming to this room as that. And I really understand and honor and respect that that is your positionality. But for the context of grant seeking and for the context of this conversation, you are not any of that. You're not a fashion designer, you're not a content creator, you're not a clothing brand. What you are when it comes to grants is a project leader. This framing is everything. You're changing your designer mindset from I run a clothing brand and I'm dropping a new collection of sustainable streetwear. It sounds nice, but it focuses more on what you do. Funders are not going to fund your new collection per se, right? Funders do not fund collections or inventory. What they do fund, however, is when you do that project mindset shift and say, I'm launching a 12-month zero-waste textile pilot project to digitize our local supply chain and reduce manufacturing emissions. You're now focusing on your why, on who you help, and on the broader outcomes. You can hear a couple of buzzwords here that actually align with what a lot of funders are talking about. Reducing emissions. As a fashion designer, there's a way that you can reduce emissions. There's a way that you can impact climate change, right? Digitizing supply chain, increasing jobs. So all of those things, that's a mindset that you have when you're thinking of your work, not just as fashion and art, but more so as a project that is a means towards an end, and an end that is aligned with what the funder is looking to fund and what they're looking to really be accountable to their funders as well. So that's one of the key alignments here that we have to think about. The funders are not going to pay for your apparel. They will pay, however, for measurable impact. And you can get to measurable impact through your apparel, through your fashion design. And we're going to talk about how in this conversation. So you want to show how your work in general addresses larger societal challenges that funders care about. So for example, if you used upcycled fabrics, you addressed climate crisis. If you manufacture locally, you address economic development and job creation. So this is the language that you actually want to start using in your grant applications. And you will find it will be very easy actually once you define and describe and really create your projects around this language, because you'll find it easy to find the grants and the funders that are aligned with what your larger outcomes are, right? So if you're selling internationally, for example, you're driving Canadian export growth, and CanExport gives like $50,000 already in grants for Canadian export growth. So this is the fundamental shift that we want to start with. So that's shift number one. How is this landing with folks? Questions? Amazing. So now, in addition to that, another thing that I want you to do right now is forget about the money. I know it sounds like a juxtaposition of some sort, because we're here to talk about money, Justina. Why would you tell us to forget about the money? Because when you focus on the money, you skip the step that comes before the money. It is focusing on the thing that you want to get the money for, which I know, again, doesn't make sense. But the first crucial step here and I say a lot of founders make this mistake, is you're focusing on the funds before you focus on what you want to get funded. So for the next few minutes, we're going to put the funds aside and we're going to focus on what is it that we actually want to get funded. Because if you focus on what you want to get funded, then it's easy to align with funders. It's easy to look to find and connect with people that are aligned with what you want to get funded, because you already know what you want to get funded. And it's easy if someone comes and offers to give you 100K right now, because you know what you want to get funded, you can very confidently speak to, this is how I'm going to steward your money. This is how I'm going to use these funds, and give that funder confidence to give you that 100K, because you've done the work that comes before jumping to the money. For the next few minutes, we're going to forget about the money and we're going to focus on building a winning project. What your business's next big initiative is, how to build a compelling story around it, because everything comes down to storytelling. Like, guys, I can't emphasize enough the power of storytelling. And I know you guys have it in you because you are creatives, because you're creators, and creators are storytellers. You tell stories through your technology, you tell stories through your content, you tell stories through the arts and the fashion pieces that you put together. There's such huge power in storytelling, because that is how you can bring your vision across to the funder. That is how you can align to the funder's mandate and the funder's vision. But beyond just a beautiful story, and I'll give you a framework for what makes for a beautiful story in the grants world. Beyond a beautiful story, because everyone can tell a story these days, because ChatGPT will help you create the most beautiful story, right? But beyond the story is a credible plan. Right? A plan that is so undeniably fundable, a plan that really is intentionally designed. I will talk about this quite often when I'm talking about projects and talking about grants, is intentional project design. Because funders are looking to say, has this person thought about all the dependencies of running this project? So if you're running a project for mothers, have you thought about childcare for those mothers? Have you thought about transportation, like intentionally designing for every dependency that is attached to your participants and your beneficiaries? All of this comes from having a compelling and credible plan. And we'll talk about this in a second. So money aside, let's talk about what we want to get funded instead of what funds we want to get. Now, I've talked about the story. Again, story is the cornerstone of everything. When you're selling your vision, I think everything around entrepreneurship, everything about running a company comes down to the different stories that we tell. When you're bringing on a new team, you're telling them the story of how this venture will benefit them economically. This venture will benefit whatever purposeful life they want to live. When you're selling to customers, you're selling a story to them about how your solution will solve and make their lives 10 times better. When you're selling to VC founders, you're telling them a story of how when they invest in you, somehow you're going to give them 10x their investments. But what is this story when it comes to funders? When it comes to grants, it is a story of impact, because that is one of the biggest things that grant makers care about is impact. Now, maybe I backtrack a little bit and differentiate between what we call diluted versus non-diluted funding, which a few folks might know already. So grants are essentially non-diluted funding, where funders, grant makers give you this money in exchange for they're not asking for profit. There's some funders and some grant makers that ask for profit, but they're not necessarily asking for profit in this particular instance. They're not asking for a percentage of your company, hence the dilution. So when you give a percentage of your company, you're diluting your company, hence the non-diluted version. So if they're not asking you for profit, they're not asking you for a chunk of your company, they're not asking you to return X amount of dollars on your investment. What is their return on investment? What is their ROI? I call that ROI the return on impact. It's the impact that they want as a return on their investment, because these funders are already mandated with solving for big societal issues like economic development, climate change, etc. So that is the impact that they want and a return on their investments on, right? So when now you're creating a winning, powerful project, all of that starts with a story of how your initiative aligns to that big impact, that big outcome. So in the grant world, we call this the theory of change. It's essentially the narrative that connects your actions to the change that you want to create and to the change that the funder has communicated they care about. It answers 4 simple questions. What is your ultimate goal, the big audacious vision? Why is it important? So this is the problem that you're solving for. How will you achieve this, your unique vision and intervention? Like, how will you achieve this, essentially? And they want to see innovation in approach. They also want to see realism in approach. And then what are the outcomes? And these are the specific measurable changes that the world will see through this. So let's give an example in the fashion world. So what is your big goal? So I'm going to use Sean as an example. What is Sean's big goal in, whatever venture he's building at the fashion zone? So Sean's big goal is to reduce textile waste. Right. And so why should we care about the textile waste that's being reduced? Because the fast fashion supply chain is ecologically damaging and it's contributing to the climate crisis. Right. So again, you're hearing some of these words that you see a lot of big, like even with the UN SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, like these align with some of the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has, right? So, and this means like a funder like the UN would actually be likely to fund this big project that you're talking about because you're speaking their language, reducing waste, combating the climate crisis. You've got their interest. So how is Sean going to do this? So Sean is going to launch a tech back program and a localized upcycling facility. So I'm just giving some examples that I put together. I've got zero fashion sense. I mean, I'm probably a bit fashionable, but I've got zero fashion language and jargon. These are some examples that I'm putting together. You guys are the experts, so you can make of this what makes sense and apply it to your own projects and visions that you have in mind. So now that we've understood the big goal, the why, and now the how, what is the outcome? What is the outcome that is going to be derived from these activities and from this process and from this big goal and idea? It isn't just that Sean is making cool jackets, right? It's that Sean, through creating this Take Back program and a localized upcycling facility, has actually diverted 1,000 pounds of textile waste from landfills and created 3 local manufacturing jobs. The city of Toronto will love this. 3 new jobs for the city or 10 new jobs for the city. That's how you create funder alignment. Okay, so now this theory of change, that's your North Star. It proves that you're focusing on creating real impactful change and real meaningful impact. That is just not, I need money to create streetwear so that I can benefit my business and, be a business owner. It's more so, through my streetwear, I'm diverting 100 pounds of textile from landfills, creating new jobs and benefiting the city and benefiting the world. That is meaningful, universal impact. So I'll stop here before I go to the next point, but how is this landing? Thoughts? Warm,
Justina.
cold? Yeah.
So Justina, I'm actually working on China Africa Arts Diplomacy. Yeah, so I'm working with some artists in Hong Kong. We are applying for more UN grants, some more global grants. The challenge on impact here is that intercultural understanding and relationships that are built over parties or music, that's very intangible. We're going from on a peace building kind of angle, first of all. So this was like UN AOC intercultural grant. So I'm also doing some music journalism write-ups with my IR kind of background as well. The second lens to which we're tackling this on gender, kind of using, like channeling like African philosophies on gender, talks of femininity within the Chinese context. Like you can see the difference in muscles between the two continents, basically speaking, our muscles in particular. We're struggling to come up with something like job creation or like impact. We can only say like, this is the amount of parties that we host, and this is the amount of classes that this will push for it. And these are the number of people we estimate would join in on these parties, which automatically have an intercultural kind of dance education, the intercultural education through the arts education in a way. So I'm just kind of wondering whether, the additional number counts as a social enterprise in a way, through offering services that automatically distills some kind of intercultural empathy.
Yeah, and we can chat more offline, Jackie, about your specific project, so I have more context and I can offer better. But just from what you're sharing, the impact to me is not necessarily the 1,000 people that are, I'm trying to understand your project, 1,000 people that are doing music or intercultural exchanges, etc. It is what happens when those 1,000 people do music and intercultural exchanges. that is the impact. Maybe it's reduced social isolation, increased mental well-being, etc. Like that is the impact.
Yes.
The thousand
It's very hard to measure. How do you measure impact on mental health when mental health is actually very hard to measure and even to speak up about? When these are very soft kind of metrics right there. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the next point that I'm going to share about here is the logical framework, and I think it might help answer some of your questions, Jackie, because there's a difference between impact being outcomes and high level outcomes versus outputs being a bit more measurable. There are 1,000 people that are getting jobs, 1,000 people that are getting, arts education, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I'm going to go through this, and then I think this might answer some of your questions. And if it doesn't, we can touch base offline and see ways that I can get better context on your project and support there. Was there any questions? Was there any questions about the theory of change before I go to the next point? Okay, all right. Now, we've talked about the theory of change being the story, and a beautiful story goes a long way. You have to learn how to storytell and sweet talk your way through things, essentially. But the sweet talk and the storytelling is only a small fraction. So if the theory of change is your story, the logic model, the logical framework is your blueprint. This is the simple chart that turns your inspiring vision into a credible step-by-step plan. So like I said earlier, a story without a credible plan is just a story. So we're stacking here. We're stacking rocks. You've got the story, and now we're going to create a credible plan attached to that story. So the credible plan, the logical framework, the logic model, it maps your inputs, which is what you need, into your activities, into your outputs, into your outcomes. I'm going to go back to what Delgado had shared earlier, and I suspect here is where you might have misaligned, Delgado, with your funder, where you said you did this whole application only to find that it wasn't in the right method or right structure, etc. I find that there's a universal language, and I'm going to talk about my universal equation in a second. There's a universal language that funders everywhere are really going for, and it maps out in the questions they ask you. You'll see that they'll ask you for a budget. A budget essentially is another word for the inputs. What are these resources that you need, right? And then they'll ask you for a work plan, which is AKA the activities. What are the things that you're going to do? When are you going to do them? Who's involved in doing these things? And then it's the output. It's the measurable evaluation pieces. So, okay, what comes out of these activities that you've done? How will you measure the output leading to the right outcomes? And the outcomes being like the global and grander changes and impacts that come from your work. So let's backtrack a little bit and use the example of Sean's textile tech back program. So what are the inputs that you need? Again, being budget. So for example, you're going to need fabrics, you're going to need tech packs, maybe you need a sewing machine, maybe you need a fashion designer. All of these are inputs, and they should be reflected in your budget. And I almost always have a whiteboard and create direct links to say, okay, sewing machine leads to activity X. Because the worst thing that you want is for your budget to have a sewing machine, a program manager, fabrics and tech packs and all of these things. And then nowhere in your activities does it show how these things that you said you want money for are going to be used. So if you're buying a sewing machine, what activity costs for a sewing machine? Right? So that is, again, intentional design, but also that is proper stewardship of people's money to say, this money that you're giving me will buy this, and I need to buy this because I need to do this activity. And I need to do this activity because I need this activity to produce XYZ outputs. And I need these outputs because when we have 500 units of streetwear produced from 100 pounds of recycled textiles, then it means 100 pounds has been diverted from the landfills. And if that has been diverted from the landfills, maybe there's even a direct correlation to say for each 100 pounds of fabrics and textiles that have been diverted from the landfills, it reduces emissions by 0.6%, right? So that is an outcome that contributes to the climate crisis. So that is the logical framework. So it has to make sense, and every input must lead to an activity, every activity must tie to an output, and every output must be linked to a greater outcome. So if the greater outcome, and the greater outcome is what the funder actually cares about. If the funder cares about job creation as the ultimate outcome of whatever you're doing, so what output leads to that job creation? Maybe it is like 10 new jobs created because we needed folks to clean the landfills or whatever that is. So to get 10 folks to clean the landfills, what are the activities that would lead to that? So it is a landfill cleaning campaign, as an example. So to have a landfill cleaning campaign, what do you need our money for? What are those inputs that you need? Well, we need money for marketing. We need money for tools and shovels and wheelbarrows, whatever the case may be. So it has to make logical sense, hence the logical framework. Right. So this is the single most important tool for proving to your funders that you're a good steward of your capital. Because what distinguishes, if we all have the same ideas, and most of us will have the same ideas because you're all using ChatGPT for your grant writing. So if 5 people have the same idea, what are the things that make Delgado get the grant over Sean, or Sean get the grant over Angelique? It is in part this credible plan that shows that you're a good steward of their capital, but then a couple of other things that I'll talk about as part of the universal equation. But yeah, so this logical framework also shows that you're not just a dreamer, you're not just a creative dreamer, because as creatives can be very dreamy, we can create, but it shows that you're not just a creator, but you're also a builder with a plan. You have your story, you have your blueprint, so you're officially fundable-ish. Now, before we finalize what makes for that your application to be different and to be funded over the next person's application, the other piece that I want to touch on is what I said I call my universal funder equation. So every grant application might seem different on paper. You might write 10 grants and they might seem different on paper, but I can almost guarantee you that every funder is evaluating you on the same core principles. And this is what the universal equation covers. So it starts with your compelling story, which we've talked about, your theory of change. A credible plan, we've talked about that as your logical framework or your logic model. But we need to add 3 more things that are equally important. And one of them is the proof of concept. Entrepreneurs, we all know what that is, right? So we know what a proof of concept is. So funders want to back winners. So the proof of concept essentially shows that I can do hard things. I have done this before, or I have done something like this before. I am capable of getting an idea and bringing it from just being an idea in my head to a tangible product, a tangible creation, a tangible innovation. Now, you don't always have to wait for the funding to begin to create this project of yours. It's like the chicken and the egg. Like you need the money to build a project and to deliver the project that then gives you the proof of concept, but then you need the proof of concept to show that you can steward the funding, right? So this is why I always emphasize that you don't necessarily always have to wait for funding. I always say, what is the smallest thing you can build with what you have? I always say, start with where you are and with what you have. So this could be a small like capsule collection that's self-funded, or like a small successful pop-up shop, or like it can just be as tiny as you in a house with 5 friends and you've created a collection and you tell a story around how that collection means something to you. In my nonprofit, I want to give an example of Elevator Leadership. Last year, we were doing this program for women in leadership, and we didn't have the funding at the time. And it was essentially meant to be like a 12-week accelerator program where we train women, Black women in particular, to get into leadership roles with other tools that they need. And we didn't have the funding for this, but I sat down with myself. I was like, I don't have the funding, but what do I have? I have the ability to create a curriculum. So I know what the 12 topics need to be. I can put a call out in my ecosystem and ask who can run this curriculum. People raise their hands like, yep, I'm going to do that workshop. Before I knew it, I had 10 presenters to do the workshop for the 12-week program. So that is a small step. Now, once I have that, I'm running my programs. Then I started telling stories about it. Every week when we ran a session, I would post about it to say, as part of this program, this is what we did. This was the impact. How exciting is it to see that the problem we're solving for is actually a problem and validated by members of our community that we're serving? Guess what happened? A funder came up and said, we really like the work you're doing. We know you've already started the program, but we're going to fund you anyway and help you have enough funding for the remainder of the program. And that funding even helped us take a group of 12 women to a weekend getaway as part of that program, took them to a cottage. They had a restful weekend, all because I was able to have a plan that I was implementing on the smallest scale and tell stories around that and show that I have proof of concept. Another piece I like to emphasize on the proof of concept, because sometimes I hear folks say, well, I've never done this as my own venture. I don't have proof of concept because I've never done this project before. But half the time we already have the skills that are needed to run those projects, because we might not have done them in our own ventures, but maybe we did them in our 9-to-5s. The very first grants that I got for my nonprofit, Okura Academy, I applied for that grant, and I remember they were asking me, hey, do you have experience running projects like this before? My immediate answer was, no, I don't have experience. But then I paused. I was like, I'm working a 9-to-5 where my entire role is around creating projects and delivering projects and dealing with the community. So I have done this before. And then I told that story around that. The funder was convinced, and then they gave me the funding. So that's another way to structure your proof of concept piece. So this is important to the funder, because remember, grants are an investment. They may not be like venture capital, but they are an investment, and the funders want return on their investment, that return being impact, as we've already established. And so showing that you've done this before, the proof of concept helps de-risk the investment for the funder. That's one thing they're really thinking of, is like, if we give this person the money, are they going to, how much risk are we really putting up here? And if you can show that you are capable, that de-risks it for them a little bit. Now, we've got the proof of concept. The other thing that we want to add to this equation is your team, right? Because a project is only as good as an organization's capacity to deliver and implement that project. And so they want to see that there's a team that has the right skill sets, the right combination of experiences, the right motivations even to deliver this project. That's what distinguishes person one from person two when it comes to this grant application. When I say team, I imagine what comes to your mind is, I need to have a co-founder and a CTO and this and that. And while all of that is good to have, team is not team in the traditional sense of the word. It is the ecosystem of support. It is the village. It is everyone that is involved in making it work. It is the volunteers. It is your board of directors. So it doesn't have to be your core team. And so sometimes folks disqualify themselves because the grant says you need to have a strong team behind this. And then they think, well, I'm just a solopreneur, so I'm not going to apply for this because I don't have a team. But who else do you have? As a solopreneur, you have beautiful relationships with manufacturing partners, your textile suppliers, your retail advisors. You've got Angelique and Brian. All of those are members of your team. Again, you just have to then know, how do I tell a story about how these people that I've identified as members of my village play a role in delivering this project and this impact that the funder is looking for. So that's another piece we want to consider. Now, we've talked about the story, the plan, the proof of concept, and the T. But all of this has to be multiplied with one of the single most important variables, which is the ROI. At the end of the day, what the funder wants to see is, what's the return on my investment? You've told me the story, the plan, whatever. What is the return on my investment? What is the return on my impact? And this is the promise that you're making to the funder, saying, if you give me this money, what is the most measurable change that we can report back? Because the funders have funders and funders have funders, right? So if you're funded by the City of Toronto, the City of Toronto might be getting their funding from the province of Ontario. That province of Ontario is probably getting their funding from the federal government. The federal government is getting their funding from the taxpayers. So everyone is accountable to someone. And they want to be able to report back to that someone that there's a high impact, a high return on the investment that someone made, right? So different stakeholders have they care about different things as return on investment, essentially. So maybe the City of Toronto might care for that return on investment to be environmental sustainability or economic local jobs, exports, etc. Whatever that is, you want to know what it is, so that you can align your work to it and show what is the measurable return on that investment that we will make. Is it the 0%, 0.6% emissions reduced, whatever the case may be? You want to understand what they care about and align it with it. This is what makes for a strong foundation. So when we multiply the story, the plan, the proof of concept, and the team, all of it multiplied by the ROI, this is what's going to make a funder go, okay, I see what you are up to here. This is a fundable venture. And this person is no longer just asking for money. They're presenting an undeniable investment in shared success, which is another piece that I want to emphasize here. Because sometimes we think of grant seeking and fundraising like we're begging for money. We're not begging for money. We're inviting funders into a partnership with us with shared success. But you have to present to them an undeniable investment opportunity that if they invest, because their partnership is they bring the money, you bring the skills, because they need you as much as you need them. And they very desperately want to give you this money because they're accountable to other funders. That's where they get their salaries. Like the city of Toronto, they get their salaries from getting money to give money. So they care desperately about it and they desperately want to give you the money, but they just need an undeniable investment opportunity presented in front of them. And I pose to you that the universal funder equation that and everything else I've shared today is a way to present your project as fundable and as an undeniable investment that will lead to shared success. So I will stop here. I know we're running out of time. I've got a couple of other notes, but I think we've talked about the old way of thinking of it, which is like reactive and opportunistic versus being strategic and having these milestone driven strategies. And then instead of focusing on just like fitting into every grant, finding alignment, which is easy when you've done the preliminary work of understanding what you're looking to get funded. And then I'll talk when I do the demo of Granted about the manual and exhausting process, which you guys already know about because you've talked to me about how manual and exhausting grant seeking is, to the systemized version that we've built with our platform, and then kind of go from there. But I'll pause here. Do we have any questions, any thoughts? How's this landing? I'll do a quick Q&A, and then I'll show you guys a quick example of how Granted can help you do all the things that we've talked about, from the beautiful storytelling as part of the theory of change to the beautiful credible plans as part of the logical framework. But any questions now? Okay, I see MSK saying it was really insightful. I appreciate that it was insightful. Thank you. Okay, while we're cooking up our questions then, yeah, I want to talk about everything that we've shared here, every insights and knowledge and experience that has gone in me building and getting over $2 million in grants framework that we've put into our platform and training our algorithms and technologies to help you not only find the right grants through our AI-powered matching algorithm, to writing grants that are very aligned with what the funders is looking for. Saving time with intelligent autofill is such a big one because you spend 12 hours on one grant only to find that it's not even a match, and then you have to start from scratch. So imagine if you had a tool that did 80% of the work for you. You're still putting in time, but instead of putting in 12 hours, you just put in 1 hour. And so if you don't get that grant, it is only 1 hour lost versus 12 hours lost. So all of these features and algorithms and automations that make it really easy for you to find the right opportunities have been built into our platform. So I'll do a quick demo of the platform to show you guys where we're at. So I was working on some stuff here, but okay, let's start here. Oh, I was saying this is the new platform. So you guys are the very first ones to see this. And I'm showing you my own nonprofits database so that you can see what it looks like with a real organization and finding real grants. But when you log in on the dashboard here, you see all the getting started pieces that help you check things off and make sure you have all the right details to match with the right grants. You see some of the matches that you already have and the total funding potential, and then all the recent projects. So this is just like a snapshot of what's going on your profile and on your account. So let's go to create profile here. So as part of creating an account, there's an onboarding process where you enter all of this information. I won't go through it here for the sake of time and because my account is already captured as part of you creating your account. So we want to know your organization's type. We want to know what business stage it is, because this also dictates what funding you're matched to, years of operation, revenue, and all of these different pieces. Equity attributes, very important, because these days a lot of funders are funding specific equity deserving groups and beneficiaries. So you want to be able to identify and tick which ones you serve and the kind of funding that you're looking for, and then high level details about your organization, because this is the core information that our algorithm will be using to match you to grants, to generate grant responses for you, to create projects for you, etc. You would answer all of this here, and then here down you can also put funding history, so all the different grants that you've received in the past. This is a very snapshot of like some of the funding. I don't want to get into it that my nonprofit has received, so you would see those here, and that's high level the starting part. And then one of the key features is also the ability to discover grants, right? We talked about there being so many opportunities out there, but the opportunities are only as good as you can find an opportunity that matches what you do and what you're looking for. So we have a database of over 1,500 grants, and we've got multiple features here that allow you to select the specific kind of grants that you're looking for. So if we're looking for grants maybe in retail, in social services, in manufacturing, in technology, whatever it is, you can create these filters and see the grants that are found that align with that. And you then can click on a grant. And once you click on a grant, you have the ability to save it here. So I think this grant is already saved. So I'm going to resave it. You can share it with anyone, you copy and paste, share on social media platforms. But one feature that we added to the new platform that wasn't on the previous one is this application readiness, because you don't want to waste your time and you want to create an application when you're ready. So it shows you how ready you are for this application based on what information the platform has about you. So right now you're at a 54% readiness because we've got your organization's type. This is what the application requires. This is the application checklist. We've got your organization types, but we don't have a detailed project or application form, etc. So all of these things show you where to put your effort in getting to a state of readiness. And you can see all these additional funder and grant details, deadlines, and key information like contact information. And this is also the website where you'll be submitting the application. So you can see that here as well. Okay, so this is the grant discovery piece. And so now when I want to generate a draft application to apply for this grant, I've got a couple of options. I want to draft it on Granted or go directly to the funder website and apply from there. But obviously you want to draft it with Granted so that we can help you create the project and everything else that you need as part of that. Once I click generate with Granted, this is going to load for a second. And I already have this application running. So it will bring me to this application form where these are the actual questions that the funder is asking. And I'm going to select and answer. Our AI will answer all these questions for you. As you've seen, a lot of the questions have been selected and answered in for me with our AI. But this is based on a project that I already have created. So I'll backtrack a little bit and bring us to my projects, because one of the things that we really need to remember is that almost every grant requires that you have a project. A project, we've talked about this already, right? A project that they will fund. And sometimes the project is you, because some grants are funding individuals. So you have to talk about how you are the project and the thing that they're investing in. So as part of our project Copilot, so we have the ability, I'm going to copy and paste. Can you guys still see my screen? I took a liberty to create a little project that I want us to try out here. So let's say I want to create a Delgano, sorry, I'm just going to use your name a lot, Delgano fashion project. Perfect. And I just put one sentence summary of what I want to do. I want to create a localized manufacturing pilot that turns upcycled textile waste from Toronto factories into a zero waste streetwear collection. So just based on these little details, I'm going to go next and I'm going to select, maybe this is agriculture for some reason, health, energy, technology, manufacturing, environment. These are the different areas that covered with this project. And we're going to do this in Canada. And this is just an idea. Right now, I want to link it to any grant, although I do have the opportunity to link it to a specific grant. So say I want to create this project for this particular grant, and then our AI will use the details from the grant to create the project for you. So the project will be aligned to what that specific funder is looking for, or you can just not link it to any grant and just create a general project. And then when we're applying for a grant, we'll use the project details and the funder details to generate an application. That's another way to do it. So we're going to go next. And you've got a couple of options. So we've got Gigi, who's our AI, and she's the one who does all the amazing work in the background. So you've got the opportunity to build your project with Gigi, where she'll walk you through each section that makes for a project narrative and generate those answers for you, or you've got the option to write it yourself. So obviously we're going to go with Gigi because we want to save some time. So I'm going to create this and let Gigi start answering these questions for us. So project created successfully. Now, these sections here, these are the things, this is what makes for a project narrative. We've talked about it high level, right? The problem, the solution, the objectives, the activities, the timelines, all of these things make for a project. And you want to do this work once and for all when creating that project, so that when you start finding grants, you are saving time. So Gigi will write for us the problem based on that one sentence that we gave her. Let's have her generate this response. So it will take a couple of seconds because the AI has to make a call, and then there we go. So we've got a whole response in a matter of seconds. And this is what Gigi has written. So Toronto's textile fashion textile industry generates significant post-industrial waste, Concurrently, BIPOC folks across Canada continue to face systemic barriers and economic sovereignty. This project is not only just a project about textile and, fashion, whatever. It's aligning it with what my organization does. My organization, the nonprofit that we're using, whose account we're using right now, is focused on women, youth, employment, entrepreneurship, and economic sovereignty. So it's created a project that is focused on what I care about, the fashion and textile industry, but also aligns with my organization's general mandate. And then the third piece will be when I'm writing an application to align that then with the funder mandate. So this is an example of what a project would look like. So she's created the problem statement, and so we're going to ask Gigi to draft a solution as well, and she'll take a second and she'll draft a solution. And there's a solution. All of that information is here. I don't want to go through it, but we've got a solution, a potential solution that has been, and I can regenerate if I like, or I can just accept it and continue. So I'll accept it. So the same will happen for everything. This should take you less than 10 minutes to create a whole project. And you can obviously go in and add your edits, but less than 10 minutes to have a whole project that aligns with your organizations and aligns with the specific outcome that you want to drive through that particular project. So all of this will happen here. So I'll exit this, and I've already worked on this to save us time. So this is a very similar project that I already worked on before, and you'd see that all my details are done. So I've got my project statement. A lot of the answers have been filled out here. And an interesting piece now is I can go and see the grants that I have been recommended because I have a project semi-complete. These are the grants that are based on what I've entered about my project that I'm a fit for. This is a 35K grant that I could go in and prepare my application for. So I've got 41% readiness. That's probably because I've only answered 4 out of the 14 questions that I'm being asked, but I can see everything else that the funder is looking for, and this helps me have my checklist ready. Now, going back to our applications that we had started, one of them with this Changemakers micro grant. So using the same project, similar to Ogano's project, these are the questions that the funder is asking for. And I can go in now and answer these questions. Like if they ask me, have I been involved in any community projects or volunteer activities? I can click this and I will answer this question. So we're going to let Gigi answer this question with the information that we've given her. There's one question I didn't answer because I wanted us to go through it together. So this budget question and financials. So let's see what Gigi does for us in answering. So I can give her specific instructions on, say, keep. And so Gigi will generate a response for us here. Go, Gigi. Sometimes these things take a while, but let's see what she comes up with. Okay. Like I said, still working on that UX UI, so I just sent that to the tech team to fix it. But we've got a response now. So this is a whole budget for the 5K that the funder is asking for. We've got budget justifications. So we talked about for every input, which is the budget, the event materials, the equipment, the honorarium input, we need the activities, and the activities are the justification. So workshop and event. So this will cover the specialized training. Equipment, what will the equipment do? The upcycled recycling techniques, that is the activities, the honorarium, experienced mentors and lead designers that will guide the cohort through specialized training activities. So that is essentially everything that we've talked about today is what goes into creating is what has gone into creating our technology to make it easy for you to create a project and come to a place of readiness. And essentially, this grant is ready to submit. And now that my application is ready to submit, all I have to do is export it. I can export it as a Word document, or I can go directly to the funder portal. I think this is where we had found that grant. Perfect. So I can go directly here to the funder website, which is where they're asking me for these application questions. I can essentially copy and paste these responses in the appropriate fields. So where they ask me, have you ever been involved in any project? Gigi has already answered this question. So I can just copy and paste this directly here. And before I know it, I'm ready to submit this application, and it has taken me less than 30 minutes. So that is the technology that we've built for you guys. So in addition to all of these beautiful things here, there's obviously the ability to manage grants. So I can see the different cycles that my grants are going through. So I've got grants that I've saved, they are under my prospecting, grants that I'm still preparing that I have applications for. I have grants that are reviewing. So the one that we were just working on, we just said it was ready for submission. So it's under review. So I can see all of this here. If I click view full grant details, this now becomes a workspace. So I can mark the grant as submitted. I can take it back to draft if we're still drafting it. I can add on notes attached to this grant, such as get Delgano to send document. And I'll save this notes. I can add comments here. So the same way that you would on an Asana board. So I can add comments, I can tag different users, because another part of our platform is you can bring on up to 10 users, depending on the membership plan that you have, up to 10 collaborators to work on grants. You can add team tasks and delegate, and then you can also go on readiness. So I have the complete application form. So we can say I have this. Okay, so because this is under reviewing, I can't edit this. So when I take it back to draft, I'll be able to edit that I already have this document, or I don't have this document yet. And then it gives us a checklist of how ready we are. So this is your grant workspace. Yeah, pretty much it for the most part. And you're also able to discover funders. So if we go City of Toronto, if I find one grant by the City of Toronto, chances are the City of Toronto has many other grants. So this dashboard allows you to see all the different other funding opportunities that that funder has. So you're not just discovering a grant, you're discovering a funder. And discovering a funder means you're discovering 10 plus grant attached to that funder. And you're able to do that here. And you can also request funder insights, which is essentially ask for specific details about that funder. Say, I would like to know who they funded in the past. What's the average giving size? Do they fund organizations like mine? You can ask this. This is a manual process that we do in the back end. Our research team will gather these details for you. But again, part of your membership is you can only ask for a handful of these because of how manual it is per month, unless you're on one of the higher paid plans. But I'll pause here. I hope this kind of makes sense to you guys as the platform that we've built. Any questions?
I have a question. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing with us. A couple questions come to mind. One is about the handling of the data. If folks put proprietary information about their technologies, and how's that handled? And the second question, maybe if you can touch on what you see in terms of conversion and expectation management regarding grants in general, that would help. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking those questions. So to answer question one around data, it is highly secure in our internal databases, and we're actually in the process of pursuing SOC 2 compliance as well. And so that's a credibility badge that comes with ensuring your data is safe and not mixed and handled. And everything that you do on our platform remains your intellectual property. It's your intellectual property. So we do not make any claims to it, and it is secure to your account. And then the other question was around conversion. Could you repeat the other question? When you say conversion, what are you?
Just from your experience as well as with the platform now, because like you mentioned, 70% rejection rate. I just want to kind of gauge it overall, like what you expect as, you know, how many you would get through.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I will say that at the end of the day, grants and fundraising is like sales. And so it is a volume game. So you want to send out as many applications as possible to increase your chances of getting that. Hence the need for a systemized way to do that. So you're not spending 40 hours per week on like 2 or 3 grants. But even with that said, the goal of our platform is on one hand to really help you automate things and help you apply for as many opportunities as possible, but also help strengthen your application so you've got better chances of aligning with funders and consequently getting more funding. So that is the goal. We don't make any guarantee claims because we will be sued if we did that. So using our platform does not guarantee that you will get funding, but it does increase your chances of getting funding because you've got a stronger application that aligns with the funder mandate and does not miss on those key details that the funders are looking for, because we're only human and we can easily miss those, and also allows for you to apply for way more grants. Like I said, we've had over the past 6 months over 700 users using our platform in the first version of the platform, hence the need to revamp as we've done with this new platform. It was very heavily focused on discovery. So we're helping people discover grants, and we hadn't really polished up our AI tools the ways that we have now so folks can apply for that funding. But even with that, I think we had almost 40 applications submitted through our platform, and about 10 of those were granted. And we've had folks receive over 100K, almost 100K in funding in total from those folks. So 10 of 40 is 25%, I want to say, give or take. Yeah, which is, I think, a decent acceptance rate in the grants world. Does that answer your question?
That's super helpful. And also in terms of when applications get rejected, a lot of times funders don't provide feedback. How do you manage that?
Yeah, they don't provide feedback. I think part of it is like on you to go and ask for that feedback and have those conversations, because technologically we haven't found a way to pull that feedback out of them. I think in the next couple of quarters, as we expand, and part of the vision is to start serving the other side of the aisle, which is the grant makers, who have more insights into some of those data points from the grants and the grant makers and the funders, and we'll be able to support that. But part of what our platform is trained on is the grants that win and the grants that don't. So based on that training, that data training, we're able to then know, okay, for some reason this grant didn't win, and maybe this is the data points that made it not to win versus another grant that won. And then other times it's not even quantitative that way. It's just qualitative. It's just the quality of the relationships, like you had said earlier. People fund people they know, and people fund people they like. So that's another piece of it.
Thank you.
Did we have any additional questions? Before I forget, while I'm waiting to hear on a couple of questions, we've got a subsidized rate for you guys, which is up to 20%, if I'm not mistaken, off of any granted plan. It also has a 14-day free trial. And like I said, you would be the very first to see the product today and first to give it a try. So I think tomorrow our team would send everyone that registered for this call the discount code so you can use it, and then access to the link to activate your free trials and try everything out. And then we're a startup, so we very much welcome feedback and support, and you guys are our beta testers. So give us that feedback, give us that support. It helps us build a better product and serve you better. So all of those will come in follow-up emails to you. Amazing. Did we have any questions? If not, I'll pass it to Angelique and Brian.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Justina. That was wonderful. You're such a great speaker, and this is a great platform. I hope you all learned a lot today and that you do take advantage of that discounted price. Yeah, if you have any questions and you are a Fashion Zone member, you have my contact, so you can email me. I'm going to drop our general email here. So if you're not a Fashion Zone member and you're interested in learning more about our space, please feel free to email us as well.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and being an engaging crowd today.
It was good to see you all.
Bye-bye,
everyone.
Thanks
Take
again.
care.